You are about to read 10 accounts taken from real incidents reported to law enforcement, documented in court records, and recounted by the people who lived through them. The names of some individuals have been withheld or changed at their request. The locations are real. The fear was real. These are not stories designed to make you helpless. They are stories designed to make you smart and careful and alive. They are stories about the moment ordinary life reveals a seam, and what it takes to walk back out through it. Asterisk, the wrong turn on Highway 12. It was supposed to be a 6-hour drive. That's what my GPS said, at least, when my sister Becca and I loaded up her Civic in October of 2019 and pointed it south toward our parents' house in rural Tennessee. We'd done the drive 100 times. We had snacks. We had a playlist. We had that comfortable road trip silence that only exists between people who've known each other their whole lives. The trouble started around mile marker 74 on Highway 12. About 3 hours into the drive, my phone dropped, signal not unusual out there. Deep in the hills, where the trees press so close to the road they feel like walls. What was unusual was the detour sign, orange and reflective, exactly the kind you're trained your whole life not to question. Road closed. Follow detour. An arrow pointed left onto a county road I'd never seen on any map. We should ignore it, I said. Becca was driving, and she shook her head, already turning the wheel. It's a detour, Meg. There must be construction or something. The county road swallowed us whole. No streetlights. No other cars. The asphalt turned to gravel, and then the gravel thinned out, and we were driving on packed dirt. And that's when the first feeling hit me that low. Animal wrongness that sits in your gut before your brain catches up. I opened my Maps app. No signal. I tried the radio. Static on every channel. Becca was focused on the road, leaning forward over the wheel, the way she does when she's nervous but won't admit it. I watched the trees. I'm telling you this because it matters. I was watching the trees, and that's how I saw him. He was standing about 30 feet off the road, in the underbrush, perfectly still. A man in dark clothing, and he wasn't walking or moving or doing anything you'd do if you'd broken down or gotten lost. He was just standing there, parallel to the road, watching our headlights pass. By the time I processed what I was seeing and said, Becca, stop, wait. No, don't stop. We'd already gone past him. What? She said. There was a man in the trees. She checked the rear view. Empty road behind us. You're scaring yourself. Maybe. Except 2 minutes later, we saw the second sign. Not an official detour sign this time. This one was handmade plywood with words painted in red. Bridge out, turn around, and below that, in smaller letters, stay on the road. The bridge was not out. We could see it from where we stopped, 20 feet ahead, solid and intact, over a small creek. Someone had put that sign there. Someone wanted us to turn around and go back the way we came back, past the man in the trees. I made. Becca locked the doors right then. I don't know what I thought that would accomplish, but my hands were shaking and I needed to do something. We sat there for maybe 45 seconds, engine running, headlights on that fine, whole bridge, and I thought about the detour sign, how it had appeared out of nowhere on a route we'd driven many times before, how it had been placed just where the cell signal died, how whoever was standing in those trees had been expecting us. Drive over the bridge, I said. My voice was very calm. That happens to me sometimes when I'm most afraid. Everything goes quiet and flat. Drive over the bridge, and don't stop, and don't look back. Becca drove over the bridge. On the other side, the dirt road connected back to a county highway I recognized, and within 10 minutes, we had cell signal again. I called the county sheriff's non-emergency line as soon as I had bars. The dispatcher told me that Highway 12 had not been closed that evening. There was no authorized detour. They never found who put those signs up, and whoever was standing in those trees, never identified. The detective I spoke to later told me it had the hallmarks of a setup disabled the navigation, route victims to an isolated area, use a second sign to push them back toward an accomplice. It's called a funnel trap, he said, and it's more common than people think. I will never take a detour again without verifiable cell signal and a confirmed report of the road closure. And when that gut feeling hits the one that arrived before, I even consciously registered the man in the tree's eye will not wait for my brain to argue me out of it. Your body knows things your rational mind is still catching up to. Trust it. Please trust it. Asterisk, he was already inside, have lived alone for 9 years. I'm careful. I checked the locks twice before bed, front door, back door, sliding glass patio door, in the same order every night. I mention this because I want you to understand that what happened to me in March of 2021 was not the result of carelessness. Sometimes the thing that's wrong isn't the lock. Sometimes it's the window you painted shut 4 years ago that someone else has quietly, patiently unpainted. I started noticing things in February. Small things, individually meaningless. My kitchen chairs weren't where I left them. A cabinet I never use was open. My dog, Ruperta, 12-year-old beagle who had not barked at anything more threatening than a squirrel in years, started sleeping pressed against the bedroom door instead of at the foot of my bed, and he growled during the night. Low, continuous, directed at the hallway. I told myself it was his age. Old dogs get strange. The night it became undeniable was a Tuesday. I woke at 2 a.m. for no reason I could identify, not a sound, not a dream, just a sudden, complete wakefulness that felt like a hand on my shoulder. The room was dark. Rupert was pressed against the door, rigid, and he wasn't growling. He'd moved past growling into silence, which I now know is worse. Dogs go silent when they've made a decision. I lay there for probably 3 minutes, doing nothing but breathing. Then I heard the refrigerator open. My bedroom is at the end of a short hallway. The kitchen is on the other side of the apartment. In a completely quiet building at 2 a.m., I could hear the seal release and the soft mechanical exhale of the refrigerator opening. I heard the clink of a bottle against a shelf. I heard, unmistakably, someone drinking. I did not scream. I did not turn on a light. I picked up my phone from the nightstand. I slid out of bed, and I went to the window. I live on the 2nd floor. The drop to the parking lot is about 14 feet. I opened the window, and I dropped down to the dumpster enclosure below. And I cut my hand on something I never identified. And I ran to my neighbor's apartment in bare feet and pounded on her door until she opened it. The police found a man in my apartment. He'd been there, they estimated, based on evidence, for several days. He was sleeping in my storage closet during the day. He'd eaten my food. He'd used my bathroom. The window in the 2nd bedroom, the one I'd painted shut, had been carefully opened over what they believed was weeks of incremental work, a few millimeters at a time, so I'd never noticed the paint cracking. He was not a stranger. He was a man I'd had 2 dates with 9 months before, who I'd stopped seeing because something felt off. I hadn't been able to articulate the feeling at the time. He was perfectly polite. He said all the right things, but There was something in the way he cataloged my apartment on those dates, quietly noting things, asking specific questions about my routine that I had written off as attentiveness. If you take nothing else from my story, take this: get a door alarm for your bedroom. Not just the front door, your bedroom door. It is the last line. And listen when someone makes you feel cataloged, because that is a different feeling than being seen. And your nervous system knows the difference, even when you can't put words to it yet. The campsite at Site 11. Four of us went into the Shawnee National Forest that August weekend. Me, my husband Derek, and our friends Colleen and Paul. We'd reserved Site 11 at a campground I'm not going to name specifically, both out of respect for the staff there who were completely innocent in what happened, and because I'd rather you didn't have nightmares about a specific place you might have been. We arrived on Friday evening, set up tents, made dinner on the camp stove, had a few beers around the fire. It was the kind of night that reminds you why you do this. Hot insect loud, the fire throwing orange light against the dark tree line. By 11, everyone had gone to bed. I woke at somewhere around 1:30 because I heard footsteps on the other side of our tent. Crunching footsteps, deliberate, circling. I lay still and listened. They went around the tent once, then again. Derek was asleep beside me, and I almost woke him. But the footsteps stopped, and I told myself it was a deer, and I went back to sleep. In the morning, Colleen and Paul asked if we'd heard someone walking around the campsite during the night. They had two. Different timing. They'd heard it around 3 a.m. They'd also seen a light, briefly, through the mesh of their tent, like a phone flashlight, moving between the trees just beyond the campsite boundary. We talked ourselves into staying Saturday night. We checked our cars, nothing touched. Our cooler, our food, bags all secure. We told each other it was probably just another camper taking a late-night walk, disoriented, or a ranger doing rounds. Saturday night, around midnight, Paul woke up to use the bathroom and found that someone had placed a rock on each of our cars' hoods. For cars, for rocks, each one set precisely in the center. Nothing else was touched. No note, no damage. Just for rocks, each about the size of a fist, arranged with an intention that was impossible to mistake for accident. Paul woke all of us. We packed up and left at 12:30 in the morning, headlights cutting through a forest that felt suddenly, profoundly hostile. We reported it to the campground office and to the Forest Service. The ranger we spoke to on Sunday morning didn't seem surprised. He told us there had been other incidents at that campground: watching behavior, property displacement, intimidation without overt threat. They suspected someone who lived near the forest boundary and had developed a fixation on the campground. The rocks are what still stay with me. Not the footsteps, those could be explained. The rocks required planning. Someone brought them to those cars and placed them with care in the dark while we slept, to let us know they had been there, to let us know they could have done something else and chose not to. This time, I camped again the following summer. I will keep camping, but I sleep with a personal alarm clipped to my tent zipper now, and I don't brush off the sound of footsteps in the night. It's probably nothing has an evil twin named. It was definitely something. Learn to tell them apart. Asterisk, the Good Samaritan. I was driving back from my sister's wedding in Georgia, alone, on a Sunday night in November. Interstate 75, somewhere in the scrub pine corridor between Cordell and Valdosta, which is one of the loneliest stretches of road I know. Miles between exits, minimal lighting, the kind of emptiness that has a sound. My tire blew at 9:40 p.m. I know the exact time because I checked my phone the moment I heard the pop and felt the shimmy in the wheel. I managed to get the car to the shoulder safely. I turned on my hazards. I called AAA, and I was told the wait was approximately 90 minutes. I was on the phone with my husband, keeping him updated, when the truck pulled up behind me. Clean, white pickup. Newer model. No markings. The man who got out was maybe 50, wearing a baseball cap and Carhartt jacket, and he was already calling out that he'd seen my hazards and wanted to help before he'd gotten 20 feet from his truck. He had, as I noted, with the particular attention women develop for their own survival, his hands visible the whole time. He looked like somebody's dad. He looked, if I'm honest, like safety. He knew how to change a tire. He had his own jack, better than mine. While he worked, he talked about his drive, about his daughter who was about my age, about a restaurant in Valdosta he liked. He was warm and funny and completely normal, and the tire was on in 15 minutes. Then he asked if I wanted to follow him to the next exit for coffee, just to make sure I got on the road okay. And I said yes. I followed him off the exit. ABP station, a Waffle House, the specific ordinary geometry of a highway interchange. He pulled into the Waffle House lot, and I pulled in behind him, and he got out of his truck and turned back to me with a smile. That's when I saw the second man get out of the truck's passenger side. He'd been there the entire time, sitting in the cab while the first man changed my tire, while I stood 3 feet away in the dark on the side of an empty interstate, just sitting, waiting. And now here he was, and something about the way they looked at each other, quick, communicative, a whole conversation in a glance, made me understand that I had made a terrible mistake. I locked my doors. I called my husband. I said the exit number out loud. I sat in that parking lot with my engine running and my phone pressed to my ear, and I watched those two men watch me for 4 minutes, until a state trooper happened to pull into the lot for coffee. I flagged him down from inside my car without rolling down my window, just pointing and waving until he walked over. The 2 men left the moment the trooper approached my car, got in that clean white truck, and were gone before the trooper and I had exchanged 10 words. I have no proof of what their intentions were. I want to be honest about that, but I know what I saw in that look between them, and I know that the second man had been invisible to me for the entire 15 minutes I'd stood on that roadside, feeling safe. I know I said yes, because a lonely road at night has a way of making danger look like rescue. AAA, a charged phone, a car mount so you can talk hands-free, a door that stays locked. These are the boring, practical things. But the most important thing I did that night was not drive away from that parking lot before I had a witness. Asterisk room 217 business travel is its own kind of vulnerability. You're tired. You're in an unfamiliar building. You've given your real name and home address to a stranger at a front desk. And that stranger has handed you a key to a room in a building full of other strangers. We've decided, as a society, to find this completely normal. I traveled for work 4 to 5 times a year and had never had an incident. That changed at a hotel in Louisville, Kentucky. In the spring of 2018, I won't name the Chenet, was a major one. One you've stayed at hand. I will say that how the staff handled the situation afterward was, to put it charitably, deeply inadequate. I checked in on a Tuesday evening and went straight to my room. Room 217, showered, ordered room service. Worked for a few hours, went to bed. Around midnight, I woke to a sound that I placed immediately as the electronic lock on my door. That specific click and release of a keycard reader. I sat up. The door opened. A man stepped into my room. He stopped when he saw me sitting up in the bed. For a moment, neither of us moved. I was calculating everything at once: distance to the door, phone on the nightstand, whether I could make noise before he crossed the room. He said, "Oh God, I'm so sorry," he said. "I think they gave me the wrong room." He backed out and the door swung shut. I called the front desk immediately. I was told there had been a key encoding error and I'd been assigned a room that was already occupied. The other guest had been given a key to room 217 as well. A mistake. It happens. They offered to move me to a different room, which I accepted, and gave me a discount voucher. Except here is the thing I thought about for the entire rest of that trip. And many nights after, how do I know that's what happened? The clerk told me a story. The man told me a story. Both stories made me the beneficiary of a harmless accident. The alternative story, that a man had obtained a key to my room through social engineering or a complicit employee, or that he'd used a cloned card and had walked in on an outcome he hadn't expected, requires the same set of physical facts. I reported it formally after returning home. The hotel's corporate security office responded with a form letter. What I do now, I use the door bar lock every single time. In every hotel, before I do anything else. I put my bag against the door before I sleep, not to stop anything, but because the sound of it falling would wake me. I never tell the front desk my room number out loud if anyone is standing nearby. And I verified, through a consumer advocacy attorney I spoke to, that in most states you can request a room reassignment at any time for any reason, and the hotel is obligated to try to accommodate you. I also want to say this: he looked genuinely embarrassed. He looked in every way like someone who'd had the wrong room key, and maybe that's exactly what happened. But in that moment, in that dark room, I understood for the first time that I had been trusting a system, the hotel check-in process. The key encoding the human beings operating the front desk without ever questioning it. We outsource so much of our safety to institutions. Sometimes they fail us. Be the last line of your own defense. The Lake House My Friend group has rented the same lake house in northern Wisconsin for 6 years running. It's become the thing we look forward to all year, 10 of us, 3 days. A house with a dock on a private lake ringed by trees. No neighbors within a half-mile. It's perfect and remote, and we've always felt completely safe there. We felt that way right up until the night we found the camera. Jake found it on the last day of our trip in July of 2022. He was moving a smoke detector in the main bedroom to plug in his phone. Charger, the outlet, was right below it on the same wall end. When he tilted it, he saw the lens. It wasn't a smoke detector. It was a housing with a smoke detector graphic printed on the front and a small camera behind the lens, aimed at the bed. We found 4 more, 1 in the second bedroom, 1 in the living room, inside a fake router that was plugged into the wall beside the real router, 1 in the bathroom, inside a wall clock above the mirror, 1 on the back porch inside a decorative lantern that we'd never questioned because it fit perfectly with the cabin aesthetic. Whoever had done this had thought carefully about objects that would never register as intrusive. The vacation rental management company was notified within an hour. The police were notified within 2. What followed was months of investigation that I don't have space to fully describe here. But the summary is this: the property owner, not the management company, But the individual who owned the house and had listed it for vacation rental had installed the cameras himself years before. They were connected to a private cloud account that he accessed remotely. The investigation established that they had been running, at minimum, for the previous 2.5 years of our annual rentals. I want you to hold that for a moment. 2.5 years. Intimate footage from a private space we'd considered our personal retreat. Footage of people we love. Footage of things I refuse to put into words. 2.5 years. I will not stop renting vacation homes. But I now travel with a radio frequency detector, which is an $80 device that you can find on Amazon and which will alert to the wireless signal of a hidden camera or audio device. Before anyone unpacks, before anyone changes clothes, the whole house gets swept. I know it sounds excessive. I know it sounds paranoid. I have 10 friends who will tell you it is neither. He followed me home from the gym. I need to start by saying that I noticed him at the gym. I noticed and I immediately explained it away, which is the thing I want you to understand, not the noticing, but the explaining away. He was on the treadmill across from the weight floor and he was watching me, and I thought, maybe he's just looking in this direction. Maybe I'm being arrogant. I did not want to be the woman who thought every man looking at her was a threat. I'm telling you this so you understand how the lie we tell ourselves, the one about not wanting to seem paranoid, can walk you right into danger. This was January 2020, a 24-hour gym in suburban Phoenix where I worked out 3 or 4 times a week, usually between 6 and 8 in the evening. I'd seen him a handful of times before, but never paid attention. That night he was there when I arrived, and still there when I left at 7:45. I walked to my car, and I got in. And I was checking my phone when I looked in my rear view and saw him coming across the parking lot toward me. I started my car immediately and drove away. He drove away to a dark Honda Civic, 1 car behind me. I want to be precise about what happened next because the instinct was so clean and so correct that I think it's worth preserving exactly. I turned right out of the parking lot instead of left, which was not the direction of my apartment. He turned right too. I drove to the next light and took a left on a street I knew well. He took the left too. I found a gas station and pulled in under the brightest lights I could find and stopped the car and got out my phone. He drove past. He slowed. He kept going. I called my best friend and stayed on the phone with her until I got home, where I parked in a different spot than usual and sat in the car for 10 minutes watching before I went inside. He was at the gym the next Thursday. I had already spoken to the front desk manager, who told me, with obvious discomfort, that unless there was a direct threat they couldn't ban a member. I had filed a report with the Phoenix police, and an officer had called me back and been kind and apologetic and told me that following someone on public roads was not technically illegal in Arizona unless it crossed into stalking defined by repeated pattern and documented intent. He had not spoken to me. He had not threatened me. He had, technically, been driving on public roads. I changed gyms. I changed the time I worked out. For 3 months, I took different routes home from everywhere, and I parked on different levels in different spots, and I watched who came through doors behind me. And the honest truth is that I have never definitively confirmed what his intentions were. But I also know this: I followed my gut out of that parking lot instead of driving home. And I want you to think about what might have happened if I'd gone left instead of right, and led him directly to the one place I went every single night. Asterisk. The Airbnb, that wasn't bachelor party, was in New Orleans. 6 of us, a long weekend in May, a house we'd booked on Airbnb months in advance, for a rate that seemed a little low, but not unbelievably so. The listing had reviews, it had photos, it had a superhost badge. We wired the deposit and forgot about it until we were in a lift from the airport, watching the directions take us into a neighborhood that was notably less polished than the French Quarter photos had suggested. The address was real. The house was real. A man answered the door when we knocked. He was not the host. He was a tenant who had been renting the house for 8 months and had no idea it was listed on Airbnb. The actual owner of the property, who had created the Airbnb listing, accepted our booking, collected our $1,800, and sent us a door code that didn't work. Was an individual who'd cloned an existing, legitimate listing using stolen photos and a fraudulent host account. We stood on the porch of a stranger's house in New Orleans with our luggage at 7 p.m. on a Friday, $1,800 lighter, with no accommodation. Airbnb did resolve it after 3 hours on the phone and a great deal of documented evidence. They refunded us and found us a legitimate alternative. The company has since improved its verification systems, but here is what I learned that no policy update can fully address. The fraud was nearly perfect. The listing had 5-star reviews pulled from the legitimate listing it had been cloned from. The photos were professional. The host had response metrics. We had done everything right, including paying through the official platform. Which I could only see, in retrospect, was the door code. Legitimate Airbnb hosts integrate with the platform's smart lock system, which auto-generates codes linked to your booking dates. The code we'd been sent came in a direct message outside the platform's official communication channel 3 days before arrival. It was a workaround that indicated the host didn't have the actual ability to control the property's locks, because the property wasn't actually his. Always book vacation rentals through the platform's payment system. Never wire transfer or Venmo. Check that host communication comes through the platform's official channels, not via external messaging apps. If a code arrives via direct message instead of the platform's automated system, call the platform before you travel. And if you arrive and something is wrong, document everything with photos and timestamps before you do anything else. We still had a great bachelor party, but we spent the first 3 hours of it on hold with customer service, and my friend Danny still, years later, occasionally wakes up in a cold sweat at the memory of 6 grown men with roller bags standing on a stranger's porch in the dark. The police officer, who wasn't he, have told this story so many times since it happened that parts of it have worn smooth with repetition. The parts that haven't are the ones I'm going to tell you now. It was August 2017. I was driving my daughter home from soccer practice in the early evening. A Tuesday, a route we took twice a week, completely routine. Blue lights appeared in my rear view about a mile from our neighborhood. I pulled over immediately. I have never had a confrontational relationship with traffic stops. I turned on my interior light. I put both hands on the wheel, and I told my daughter, who was 8, to sit still and be quiet. She was wide-eyed and worried, and I told her it was fine. Just a traffic stop, sweetheart. The man who came to my window was wearing a uniform. Dark pants, a light shirt, something star-shaped on his chest. He had a flashlight. He asked for my license and registration in a manner that felt slightly off-clipped, in a way that seemed performed rather than professional, but I was focused on my daughter, and I wasn't analyzing him. I handed over my documents. He took them to his vehicle and was back there for about 3 minutes. Normal traffic stop time. Completely normal. When he came back, he returned my documents, said I'd been drifting at a stop sign, told me to have a good evening. I drove home. I mentioned it to my husband in a weird day sort of way, and it might have ended there, except that 4 days later I got a call from the county sheriff's office asking if I had been stopped on Maple Avenue on Tuesday evening by a deputy. A real deputy was investigating what appeared to be someone impersonating an officer in the area, using a vehicle with aftermarket lights and a costume quality badge. I had given a stranger my driver's license, my home address, my real name, my vehicle registration, the actual physical document which he had held in his hands for 3 minutes. I did not make a traffic stop. I made a data collection event. Everything a person would need to find me, to know my patterns, to establish that I drove that route every Tuesday and Thursday evening with a child in the back seat. All of that, taken in under 5 minutes. What can you do? You can, in most states, drive to a well-lit public place before stopping a gas station, a police station, anywhere with witnesses, as long as you're moving at reduced speed and putting on your hazard lights to demonstrate compliance. You can call 911 while you're driving to the lit area and tell them you're trying to verify a traffic stop and are heading to X address. A real officer will follow you. An impersonator will not. I didn't know this in 2017. I knew it 3 days later, and the knowing was too late. Asterisk what the neighbor's dog found. I want to be careful with this last story because some of it is still a matter of ongoing legal proceedings, and because the people involved are real and the outcomes were not all clean. But it needs to be told because it's the story, I think, about most when I think about how horror can exist directly next to ordinary life without visible seams. My husband and I bought a house in a small town in Indiana in 2016. 3 bedrooms, a big yard, a neighborhood with sidewalks and Halloween trick-or-treaters and people who waved from their driveways. We knew our neighbors on all 4 sides within a month. The one directly behind, you separated from our yard by a low wooden fence, was a man named Terry, who was in his late 60s, retired, friendly, the kind of neighbor who brought over tomatoes from his garden and offered to collect our mail when we traveled. His dog, a big mixed breed named Buster, barked at our fence. Sometimes, Terry always apologized. He gets curious. He'd say, "Digs at that fence post on your side. I'm sorry about that." He offered to fix it. We said not to worry about it in October of 2019. Our dog got under the fence somehow. We still don't entirely understand it. And we spent an anxious hour searching before we found her in Terry's yard. Digging frantically at a patch of ground near the back of his property, Terry was helping us retrieve her, and he was, this is the word I keep coming back to, he was frightened. Not embarrassed, frightened. He was very insistent that we take the dog quickly and leave, that it was fine, that there was no damage done. He put himself between our dog's digging spot and us in a way that only registered as significant afterward. I'm going to be deliberate here. I am not going to tell you what was found on Terry's property when, 18 months later, an unrelated investigation led police to search his land. I'll tell you only that Buster's persistent attention to that fence post was something that had been going on for years, and that our dog's reaction was a continuation of something every animal that came near that yard had noticed, and that human beings are the only ones in that neighborhood who hadn't. What I want to say about this is not about Terry specifically. It's about the fact that I looked at that fear on his face in October 2019 and explained it away because he'd always been kind to us, because he brought tomatoes, because the architecture of ordinary neighborliness is one of the most effective camouflages available to a person who wishes to hide something terrible. I explained away a frightened man standing between us and a piece of ground his dog had been trying to reach for years. I'm not asking you to be suspicious of your neighbors. I'm asking you to let the things that don't quite fit stay not quite fitting in your mind instead of immediately smoothing them over. The dissonance you feel when something is wrong is information. It deserves to live in you for a while before you replace it with a reasonable explanation. 3 years after we moved in, we sold the house and moved to a different town. I still think about Buster's bark at that fence post on quiet nights. I think about all the people who heard it and assumed it was just a dog being a dog. Everything I've told you tonight happened in real life. 2 real people in regular places that looked exactly like wherever you are right now. In a neighborhood, on a highway, in a hotel room, at a campsite, in the dark parking lot of a gym you've driven past 1,000 times. The exits are all marked and the doors all lock, and the world is, most of the time, completely safe. But sometimes it isn't. Sometimes the thing that's wrong is standing right next to the thing that's fine, and the only instrument precise enough to tell them apart is the one you were born with, the animal. Ancient, insistent part of you that speaks in feelings before it speaks in words. Listen to it. That's all. Just let it speak. Stay alert. Trust your instincts. Come home.